Please welcome to the stage Dr. Ed Madden.
So what would you do if you were given a second chance? I'm sure everybody in here can think of someone who's hurt them or someone they've hurt. I'm sure everyone here can think of sometime they wish they had a do-over, a chance to do it again, get it right, make amends. What would you do if you got that? I'm going to tell you a story. It's not a story with a hallmark happy ending. It's not a story that reaffirms all those things therapists tell us about how you need to talk through your conflicts, how you need to have openness and honesty. It is a story about love and grief and maybe forgiveness. It's a story about a second chance. In March of 2011, my brother called me and he said, "If you want to see your dad before he dies, you better come home soon." Now, the last time I'd seen my father was spring of 2010, a really short visit, when he told me, "We can never have a relationship with you because of your choices." Now, I didn't have a good relationship with either of my parents, but particularly my father. After I came out to them as a gay man in 1995, they sent a series of angry and sometimes hurtful letters. In one letter, my father said he would rather I was in jail for murder than admit that I was gay. He could deal with that. That is, he'd rather I'd killed another man than said I loved one. At first, I was really angry, devastated, but as the years went on, I was really just sad, realizing that given who they were and where they were and what they believed, they really couldn't have responded any other way. If you followed the recent controversy over Duck Dynasty, then you know the culture in the church I come from. That's the church. That's the religious tradition I grew up in. Now, this was almost 20 years ago, but still I think, given who my dad was, where he was, what he believed, he couldn't have responded any other way. He, I guess, except for a brief interchange at a funeral, we really didn't talk for almost 10 years. He returned books I sent that I had hoped would help him understand. One year he returned a box of Christmas presents unopened. I decided I didn't want to read those letters anymore, so I sent one back marked "Returned to Sender." And because we didn't communicate, I didn't know how sick he had become. I arrived in Little Rock at the hospital on Thursday, March 17th, 2011. It was a very long walk across that hospital parking lot, very long wait in the elevator lobby, very long walk down a hallway where there was a sign that said, "Quiet, please, healing in progress." The day I arrived was the day that the doctors gave my father a diagnosis of terminal pancreatic cancer, a cancer that had already spread to a kidney, his liver, elsewhere. So there were no options for medical treatment. There was no possibility of a cure. The only option was palliative care, hospice care. My mother didn't want him going in a nursing home, but she wanted him to go home. But she had been in a car accident a few years before, so she was facing her own pain and mobility issues herself. And my brother had taken off a lot of time already to be in the hospital, and it was his busiest time of year at work, and he had 3 very active kids. So I told my mom, "I can help." The doctor said it would just be a few weeks. My mom asked my dad if it would be okay if I went home with him. He said yes. I set up guest lectures at the university, planned to grade papers online. And on Monday, March 21st, 2011, we drove my father 100 miles back home to die. Now, my dad was a tough man, and so what we thought would be a few weeks ended up being over 3 months. And during those 3 months, my world shrank to a little house in rural Arkansas, my father, my mother, me, sometimes my Aunt Elaine, sometimes my brother. Small things, strict schedules, openings, silences. The hospice nurse told me that if my father had died of a heart attack, he would have died with all of our anger and all our distance unresolved. So this was a second chance. It was still very difficult, I wrote a lot while I was there, wrote about and thought about what it meant to be back in my childhood house, my childhood bedroom, taking care of my own parents. And mostly I wrote my journals and poems just about the daily work of hospice care, the way your life revolves around such small things. What did he eat? When are his next medications? Is he strong enough to go out? And one of the first things I had to learn was how to lift him. Don't pick him up by the armpits, which seems easiest. You risk broken bones, bruised skin. Instead, once he's eased up in bed, sits, shoulders hunched, feet slung over the edge, lean down for the hug, your arms through his and around, your hands flat against his back, his arms around you. This is what you do. Then lift him, his feet between yours, this timid dance around, this turn. Tell him to bend his knees as you ease him into the chair, its wheels locked, set him in slow. Kneel in front as if to receive his blessing. Lift each foot to its rest, wrap a blanket around him, you're going out. Stop at the old flat front desk, the last hiding place for his cigarettes. That's why he wanted up after all. Stop at the edge of the porch, lock the wheels, make sure he's in the sun, and stand silent by. He won't talk much, though the lonely cat will, rubbing its back against the wheels. Stand silent by. I worried a lot about what to say while I was there. How do you talk about difficult things? Should you talk about difficult things? You know, if any of you have been around the terminally ill, you know that when you care for the dying, sometimes there are these moments of openness for some kind of connection, some kind of understanding. But what do you say? Those last few weeks, my mother and brother and I, we read the little blue book on hospice care. We learned to watch for the signs. We all knew where the book was. It was tucked under a photo album in the dining room. And we all read it, but we never read it in front of each other. It was as if we wanted to know, but we really didn't want to know. The nurse called it a roller coaster, this lift and dip of days, the way my father may drift to sleep, twitch and shake, eyes glaze, then wake, spend the day or night alert. Sometimes we think it must be the end, but then he's back, hungry, demanding something sweet to be wheeled out for a smoke, his eyes bright, that grin. The nurse says he's done this so much that when it really does get bad, we won't know to know it or won't accept that this is it, expectant, waiting for him to wake. My mother ready to cook him anything, and me ready to lift him to his chair, wheel him anywhere. My father died on Saturday, June 17th, 2011, the day before Father's Day. When I got back to South Carolina, I put some of the poems together in a little book I called My Father's House, which was published last year. And I thought a lot about that experience, what we'd been through and what I had learned. In 2010, my father said, "We can never have a relationship with you because of your choices." And yet those last few weeks, he said, "Thank you, and I love you almost every day." And those last few weeks, last few days, he looked at me a lot. He stared at me. It was actually really unnerving. He stared at me a lot. The nurse said, "Your father really looks at you when you walk into the room. He stares at you. He must have something to tell you, but he never tells you." Later, another hospice worker listened to this story, and she said, "No, you know, sometimes as we're leaving this world, our world contracts to the small space of the room, to the few things we love. No, your father wasn't looking at you because he had something to tell you. Your father was looking at you because he loved you. It was near the end, she said. He was drinking you in. My father only brought up homosexuality once. That first afternoon when I was back in the hospital, he said, "Have you read Romans 1 lately?" He asked about your mate. I didn't tell him that the next day was the 6th anniversary of my wedding, an event my brother had said humiliated the entire family. At that moment, my mother walked back in, and he stopped talking, and he never brought up the issue again. Now, therapists like to tell us that we need to talk through our conflicts, that openness and honesty are the key to good relationships. We didn't do that. Gay and lesbian activists like to say that if we come out, we change the world around us. They like to cite those studies from the late 1990s that suggest that people who know lesbian and gay people are more likely to support equality. And as a longtime advocate for gay and lesbian rights in South Carolina, I used to say that too a lot, that coming out changes the world around you. And that may be true in general, but not always. I don't think my parents changed their minds about homosexuality. I just think we reached this place where that didn't matter as much. What mattered was being there for each other. I just wish it didn't take someone dying to be able to find that place. 3 days after my father died, my mother stopped me in the hallway as I was putting away laundry, and she was crying, and she apologized for all the ways they had driven me away. And I was crying too. A few days before I left, my grandmother called me, and she said, "Eddie, what you did was really remarkable." I don't think it was. I think you just do what you have to do. And I decided to stay. It's only after it's all over that you can recognize the gift you were given. Of course, everything's not fixed now. There's no made-for-TV movie ending to this. These things are difficult, and they remain difficult. My brother says, "You're always welcome to come home to visit," and then adds, "But your friend is not." My mother, the last time I visited, seemed to bristle whenever I used my partner Bert's name, although that may have been as much my own anxiety as anything else. And lately on the phone, she seems more open when I use his name, or if I use the first person plural, we. And really, I just think, after all that, isn't it good we're talking now? So what did I learn? I don't know. I know I had to set aside my anger to be with my dad. How you do that, I can't say. I think it's different for everyone. Depends on the person, the situation. I do know that everyone in here has hurt someone. And I know everyone in here has been hurt. Maybe you start to see the humanity in those you disagree with deeply, even vehemently. Maybe you learn to see in them your own mortality, your own weaknesses, your own frailties. Or maybe you just do what you have to do. Or maybe, like me, you have to start by learning how to lift him. Thank you.